Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The arrival. Ethan rubbed his eyes and yawned as the sound of his room's hollow projector chirped to life. The Intergalactic Academy's morning briefing scrolled across the display, filled with mundane updates about campus events and faculty announcements. He sighed, tossing the blanket aside. Another day of classes. Another day of being a curiosity among alien peers. Humans, while slowly integrating into the galactic community, were still rare in institutions like this. Ethan had grown used to the stares and whispers, but today something felt different. "Did you hear about the new transfer student?" buzzed Kadar, a reptilian classmate with skin that shimmered like molten silver. Ethan glanced up from his breakfast tray. "They say she's unusual even for an Alarnian." "Unusual how?" Ethan asked, half interested. Kadar's yellow eyes narrowed. "Alarnians are secretive by nature, but this one? She didn't even go through the usual clearance checks. Just showed up." Ethan filed the information away. The academy was diverse, but security protocol was strict. Bypassing it wasn't just unusual, it was suspicious. Later that day, Ethan finally saw her in class. Zalari stood out even among the kaleidoscope of species. Her crystalline, semi-translucent skin refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. Her sharp, angular features and piercing violet eyes gave her an intimidating presence. Despite this, she kept to herself, speaking only when addressed and avoiding eye contact. Ethan's curiosity deepened during a combat training exercise. When paired against a hulking Thraxian who dwarfed her in size, Zalari moved with lightning precision, effortlessly dodging attacks and incapacitating her opponent in seconds. The instructor praised her skill, but the other students exchanged uneasy glances. That night, Ethan drifted off to sleep, his mind still replaying the day's events. He was startled awake by the faint sound of something moving in his room. Heart racing, he reached for the security panel, but a hand clamped over his mouth. "Quiet," a voice hissed. Ethan froze as Zalari's face came into view, her features illuminated by the pale glow of his hollow display. She held a small device that emitted a soft hum, scanning his desk and personal belongings. "What are you doing?" he whispered furiously as she released him. "Saving your life," she said curtly, pocketing the device. The mystery deepens. Ethan couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. Zalari's abrupt intrusion replayed in his mind like a broken holovid. Her warning, if that's what it was, felt half-baked, as if she expected him to accept it without question. But why had she been in his room? What could she possibly want from him? By morning he resolved to find answers. But tracking Zalari down proved harder than expected. She wasn't in their first class and no one seemed to know where she was. Ethan's frustration mounted throughout the day, especially as he noticed subtle, unsettling changes around the academy. For one, the security drones that usually floated passively through the halls now seemed more active, scanning students with greater scrutiny. Faculty members appeared tense, holding quiet, hurried conversations in corners. Even Kadar, who usually thrived on gossip, seemed unusually quiet. Finally, during the midday break, Ethan spotted Zalari in the library. She was seated in a shadowed corner, her crystalline skin refracting the dim light, giving her an ethereal glow. Her eyes were fixed on a holographic display, lines of alien script scrolling rapidly. Ethan took a deep breath and approached her. "You owe me an explanation," he said, keeping his voice low. Zalari didn't look up. "You should leave?" "Not until you tell me why you broke into my room and what you meant by saving my life." He leaned closer. "Are you stalking me? Spying on me?" That got her attention. She tilted her head, violet eyes locking onto his with unnerving intensity. "You're not as unremarkable as you think, human." Ethan frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Zalari glanced around, ensuring no one was within earshot. Then she deactivated her hollow display and leaned forward. "Do you think this academy exists to foster intergalactic harmony? To unite species under the banner of shared knowledge?" "That's the general idea," Ethan replied cautiously. She smirked, a sharp, humorless expression. "Knife. This place is a hub for research and exploitation. And humans, your kind, are the newest subjects of interest." Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Subjects of what?" Zalari leaned back, her gaze sharpening. "Experiments. You've noticed the increased security, haven't you? The faculty whispering like conspirators? They're watching us all, but they're particularly interested in you. And not just because you're human." Ethan stared at her, struggling to process her words. "Why me? What makes me so special?" That, she said, gesturing to his wrist, where the Academy-issued biometric band glowed faintly, is what I'm trying to figure out. Last night, I intercepted data from your room's systems. Your biometric readings are being monitored more closely than anyone else's. Ethan instinctively covered the band with his other hand. That doesn't make any sense. I've never done anything to stand out here. Exactly, Zalari replied. Yet they're tracking you like you're a rare specimen. Ethan shook his head, struggling to reconcile her claims with what he knew, or thought he knew, about the Academy. Why should I believe you? For all I know, you're part of whatever conspiracy you're talking about. Zalari's expression hardened. I broke protocol by coming here. My presence jeopardizes my safety and yours. But if I wanted to harm you, I would have done it already. Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Ethan wanted to press her for more, but before he could, a sharp chime echoed through the library, signaling the end of the break period. This isn't over, Ethan said, standing up. That night, Ethan couldn't shake the conversation from his mind. Zalari's cryptic warning seemed paranoid, yet the tension around the Academy felt undeniable. Against his better judgment, he decided to dig deeper. He began with the Academy's central database. Accessing it without raising suspicion was tricky, but Ethan had picked up a few tricks from his tech-savvy older brother back on Earth. Using a secure terminal in his room, he bypassed the surface-level systems and found himself in a maze of encrypted files. Most of the data was routine: student records, class schedules, maintenance logs. But buried among the mundane was a folder labeled Project Anthros. Its access required a higher clearance level than Ethan had, but the name alone was enough to send a shiver through him. Before he could probe further, his terminal screen flickered, and an alert flashed: unauthorized access detected. Security has been notified, ***. The next day, Ethan found himself on edge, expecting security to haul him in at any moment. But nothing happened. Classes proceeded as usual, and no one seemed to pay him any more attention than usual. It wasn't until he returned to his room that evening that he realized someone had been inside. His belongings were slightly out of place, and the terminal he'd used to access the database was missing. Looking for this? Ethan spun around to find Zalari standing by the window, holding his terminal. How did you? You're predictable, she said, setting the terminal on his desk. I warned you to be careful. I wasn't about to sit around and wait for answers, Ethan snapped. What's Project Anthros? Zalari's expression darkened. Something you shouldn't have tried to access. You're lucky I intercepted the security alert before it reached the faculty. Why would you do that? Ethan demanded. Because, she said, stepping closer, you're part of it. And if you don't start listening to me, you won't survive long enough to find out why. Ethan stared at her, torn between anger and fear. What do you want from me? For now. Your cooperation. She held up a small disc-shaped device. I've decrypted some of the data I pulled from the lab. It's worse than I thought. She activated the device, projecting a series of images and schematics into the air. Ethan's stomach churned as he recognized some of the diagrams. One of them was a detailed scan of his own body. They're studying you, Zalari said. Every cell, every synapse. And they're not doing it out of curiosity. They're searching for something. Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. What? I don't know yet, Zalari admitted. But whatever it is, they think it's unique to humans, and to you in particular. Ethan sank into his chair, his mind reeling. The Academy, the experiments, the surveillance, it was too much to take in. What do we do? He asked finally. Zalari's expression softened, just slightly. We find out the truth. And then we make them pay for it. As her words settled over him, Ethan felt a spark of determination ignite in his chest. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, he wasn't just another human out of place. He was something more, and he intended to find out what. The forbidden discovery. Ethan lay in his bed, the weight of Zalari's words pressing down on him like a physical force. His mind buzzed with unanswered questions. About the Academy, about Zalari, and most of all, about himself. What could be so unique about his biology that it warranted this kind of attention? And why had he never noticed the signs before? He spent the next few days trying to go about his usual routine. Classes, meals, dorm life. But all of it felt distant, like he was moving through a haze. He couldn't shake the feeling that every conversation, every glance, every oddity on campus was connected to the mystery of Project Anthros. The turning point came a week later when Zalari contacted him again. By the time Ethan slipped into the shadowy depths of the Academy's archive wing, it was nearly midnight. The halls were quiet, almost eerily so. Security patrols were sparse this late at night, but there were always surveillance drones buzzing above, their glowing eyes scanning for anything out of the ordinary. Ethan glanced up, but the drones were nowhere to be seen, the lights in the corridors casting long dark shadows. He arrived at the back of the archives and found Zalari waiting by a hidden door. The air around her seemed charged, almost crackling with energy. Her eyes flicked toward him, taking in his anxious expression. "You came," she said, her tone more amused than anything else. She swiped a small device across the door's access panel, and the door slid open with a faint hiss. Inside, the room was vast and filled with rows upon rows of digital storage units, boxes of data, holographic displays, and security protocols. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. This was no ordinary archive, it was a treasure trove of classified information hidden from the public eye. Zalari motioned for him to follow her as she moved deeper into the room. "This is where the Academy keeps its most sensitive data. The kind of information that never sees the light of day." Ethan swallowed hard, his heart pounding. "And we're allowed to be here because I've made a habit of getting in places I shouldn't," Zalari said with a wry smile. "And because we don't have much time before they realize we're digging too deep." Zalari led him to a particular terminal, much older than the sleek ones used by the students. She typed rapidly, her fingers dancing across the keys. The screen flickered before displaying a series of encrypted files. "This," she said, pointing to the first document, "is the real reason I approached you. You're not just a student here, Ethan. You're a project, one they've been working on for years." Ethan leaned forward, his breath catching in his throat as the files opened. The first was a genetic map of his DNA, detailed down to the smallest strand. It was like looking at a portrait of himself, but with lines and codes that didn't belong. His body, his very essence, was being monitored, tracked and studied in ways he couldn't begin to understand. "This can't be me," he whispered. "This is..." "Exactly," Zalari cut in. "It's not just you. It's your species. Humans. The Academy has been conducting experiments to unlock what makes us different. What makes you different? And it's not just your biology they're interested in." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zalari hesitated, eyes flicking to the rows of storage units. "There's something in your DNA, something that could change everything. They think you're the key to something larger. I don't have all the details, but the research is clear. Humans in particular have an anomaly. A potential for a power the rest of the galaxy can't match." Ethan's stomach churned. He had always felt different, out of place, but now it made sense. Too much made sense. "What kind of power?" Zalari gestured to another file which brought up more images, this time of alien technology. Strange devices which, based on the schematics, appeared to be designed to manipulate energy, force fields, and even the mind. The Academy's been experimenting with ways to harness that potential. They've been testing certain humans, trying to activate whatever this anomaly is. Ethan's eyes widened in realization. "And you think I'm one of their test subjects?" "I know you are." Zalari's voice softened. "I've seen the data. And the scans from the other night confirmed it. There's something inside you. They've been monitoring your brain activity, your emotional states. They think they can trigger it." A cold shiver ran down Ethan's spine. "Trigger what?" Zalari didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled up a final document. A detailed report. As Ethan read it, his mind began to unravel the terrifying truth. The Academy wasn't simply studying humans for academic purposes. They were testing an ancient alien theory, the ability to awaken latent abilities in species across the galaxy. Some believed that these powers, once unlocked, would grant control over the very fabric of reality itself. According to the report, human beings, Ethan in particular, showed the potential to access these abilities at an exponential rate. The Academy's interest in him wasn't random. They were trying to unlock this power, using their research as a gateway to creating weapons of unimaginable destruction. Zalari stepped closer, her voice low. "It's not just about the physical tests. They've been pushing you mentally too. That's why they've been keeping track of your emotional responses, your dreams, your fears. They want to see if they can activate you." "I don't understand," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "What do you mean activate me?" Zalari's eyes darkened. "It's like a switch. When they find the right trigger, whether it's a specific emotional event, a stressor, or something else, they believe you'll unlock these abilities. And they don't care if you're ready for it." Ethan staggered back, the weight of her words crashing down on him. "Why me? Why not someone else?" "It's not just you," Zalari said. "It's all humans. They've been experimenting on hundreds of humans across the galaxy, But they think you are the one who will unlock the full potential. They think you're the key to whatever this power is. Ethan could feel the tension in the room, thick and suffocating. The data, the experiments, the surveillance, it all added up to something that went far beyond anything he could have imagined. They're not just studying us, Zalari, he said, his voice cold with realization. They're trying to turn us into weapons. Zalari nodded grimly. Exactly. And the worst part is they've been using this academy as a cover. The students, the faculty, none of them know the full extent of what's going on. It's all hidden beneath layers of secrecy. Ethan took a deep breath, his mind whirling with the weight of everything he had learned. But one thought stood out among the rest. They had underestimated him. They thought he was just another test subject, just another cog in their experiment. But he was more than that. Allies and enemies. Ethan's heart raced as the implications of Zalari's revelations set in. The academy wasn't just a place of learning, it was a breeding ground for a sinister experiment that had been running far longer than he had realized. He wasn't just a student. He was a pawn in a game much bigger than him, and as much as he tried to deny it, the truth was inescapable. He was the key to unlocking an unstoppable power. Zalari's dark eyes watched him carefully, her posture tense. We need to be careful, Ethan. If we keep digging, they'll notice. And when they do, they won't just come after us. They'll come after everyone we care about. He nodded, feeling the weight of her warning. His instinct was to run, to hide and forget everything he had uncovered. But something in him, the same part that had always felt different, out of place, pushed him forward. The truth was too big to ignore. The danger too real. He couldn't walk away now. Not when he knew what the academy was capable of. I can't just sit back and do nothing, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. I need to find out who's behind this. And why they're using humans like this. Zalari's lips curled into a half-smile, a flicker of approval in her eyes. You're starting to understand? She paused as if weighing her next words carefully. You won't be able to do this alone though. The academy is too powerful. They've infiltrated everything, the staff, the systems, even the students. We need allies. Ethan blinked, a frown forming on his face. Allies? Who could we trust? Zalari's gaze flickered toward the back of the room, where a set of old forgotten storage units sat hidden behind a curtain of dust. She gestured for him to follow. Not everyone here is part of the program, she said as they walked. There are others, students, faculty, people who suspect something isn't right. They're just waiting for someone to make the first move. She stopped in front of a sealed hatch and activated a hidden control panel. The hatch hissed open, revealing a dimly lit underground passageway. The air smelled stale, like it hadn't been used in years. Zalari stepped inside, and Ethan hesitated for only a moment before following. I've already started gathering a few of them, she explained as they walked deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels. They're not all aliens. Some are humans like you. Some even work in the academy's research departments. They've seen the signs, but they've been too scared to act. Ethan's mind raced. Could there really be others who were working against the same system that had ensnared him? The idea felt almost too good to be true, but the more Zalari spoke, the more he realized there was no turning back. The tunnel eventually opened into a large, underground meeting room. A low hum filled the air, and several figures turned to face them as they entered. Some looked human, others were alien, their features a mix of both familiar and strange. A few of them wore the distinctive uniforms of academy staff, but their expressions were grave, and their body language betrayed their unease. This is Ethan, Zalari announced, her voice firm. The human I told you about. He's ready to join the fight. Ethan felt the weight of their gaze fall on him. Some faces were wary, others filled with open curiosity. It was clear that not everyone trusted him yet. He was still an outsider to them. Someone who had only just discovered the truth, someone who had no experience in this hidden war they were waging. The first to speak was a tall, angular alien with iridescent scales covering her skin. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her voice was soft but authoritative. What makes you think you're ready to join us? She asked, her tone skeptical. You're still just a student. You've only just realized what's going on. Ethan met her gaze, his confidence growing despite the weight of her question. I'm not just any student. I've already been targeted. The academy's been tracking me for weeks. I don't need to understand the whole operation. I just need to know that you're fighting for the same thing I am. The truth? The alien studied him for a moment before nodding, her expression softening. Fair enough. But know this, human, this isn't a game. We're not just resisting the academy, we're fighting against a system that spans entire sectors of the galaxy. If you're not ready to risk everything, then you'll never be one of us. I'm ready, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. I don't have a choice. I can't just sit here while they experiment on me. Zalari smiled slightly, her gaze lingering on him with something that might have been approval, or perhaps something more. Good. You'll need all the strength you can muster. Because we don't just need to expose the academy, we need to take it down from the inside. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. What do I have to do? The alien nodded once more. We've gathered information on several of the academy's key players, those who are running the experiments. But it's not enough. We need to disrupt their plans. We need leverage. And we need someone who can get inside their inner circle. Zalari stepped forward then, her voice low but filled with urgency. I've already infiltrated one of their high-level meetings. But I can't do it alone. The next summit is in 2 days. We need you, Ethan. Ethan's pulse quickened. You want me to go undercover? Yes, Zalari said. You'll be positioned as a key player in the Academy's operations. They're already watching you, and you'll be able to gain access to the highest level of their plans. We've gotten a hold of a few of their secure transmissions. They're planning something major, something that will make their previous experiments look like child's play. He stared at her, the weight of her words settling in his gut. This wasn't just about exposure anymore. This was about stopping something dangerous before it could be unleashed on the galaxy. And when we have what we need? Ethan asked, already knowing the answer. We strike, Zalari said simply. We make sure the Academy can never hurt anyone again. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, the tension thick in the air as the group exchanged looks. Finally, the same tall alien, with the glowing eyes, spoke up again. We're in. But be warned, Ethan. Once you're in, there's no turning back. Ethan's resolve hardened. Then let's do this. Zalari gave him a small nod of approval. Then it settled. Tomorrow we begin. As the meeting broke up, Ethan lingered, his thoughts racing. There was no turning back now. He was no longer just a student at the Academy. He was a part of something much bigger, an underground movement that would challenge the very core of the system he had once trusted. But no matter how dangerous this path would be, one thing was certain. He wouldn't stop until the Academy, and everything it represented, was exposed for the lies it was built on. And if they thought they could control him, they were in for a rude awakening. A web of deception. The next 2 days were a blur of covert meetings, tight-lipped strategy sessions, and a growing sense of urgency. Ethan found himself plunged deeper into the shadows of the Academy's hidden operations, his every move shadowed by Zalari and the small, secretive group she had introduced him to. He was no longer just a student. He had crossed a line and there was no turning back. In the early hours of the 3rd day, Ethan received a message on his encrypted comm device. It was short, to the point. Asterisk, the summit is today. Be ready, asterisk. Zalari's instructions had been clear. He was to pose as a high-ranking cadet, someone with special access to Academy research projects. His new identity had been fabricated with precision, complete with an array of falsified credentials. The next few hours would be crucial. He would have to navigate through a world of surveillance, power plays, and deceptions. The summit was being held in one of the Academy's most secure facilities, a high-rise tower that jutted into the sky, its sharp edges glinting under the pale light of 2 distant moons. The building was a fortress, its outer walls lined with high-tech security measures that made it virtually impenetrable to anyone who didn't belong. Zalari had briefed him on the specifics. The summit would include key figures from the Academy's leadership, a mix of human and alien administrators, as well as representatives from various research divisions. They would be discussing the next phase of Project Anthros, the program to manipulate human biology. The goal, Zalari had explained, was to uncover the nature of the anomaly in human DNA and the best way to trigger it. For all his preparation, Ethan couldn't shake the sense of dread that gripped him as he entered the building. The air inside was cool, sterile, and suffocating. He felt like a trespasser in a world he didn't understand, where every door, every corner, was a potential threat. A guard, a tall, broad-shouldered alien with smooth reptilian skin, nodded as Ethan approached the security checkpoint. Cadet 47. Authorized for Level 3 clearance? Ethan barely suppressed a shiver. Level 3 clearance. He had never been granted access to this kind of high-security area before. He was playing a dangerous game and he knew it. As he walked through the security gates, a woman with short, platinum blonde hair and sharp features greeted him. She wore a military-style uniform that identified her as one of the Academy's higher-ups. Her piercing blue eyes studied him with a cool, calculating gaze. You're the new recruit? she asked, her voice crisp and professional. Ethan nodded, doing his best to match her composed demeanor. Cadet 47 reporting for duty? The woman gave a slight nod, though her expression remained neutral. I'm Commander Arlen. I oversee the research division for Project Anthros. You're here to assist with the upcoming demonstration, correct? Correct, Ethan replied, his pulse quickening. The word demonstration made his stomach twist. What kind of demonstration were they planning? Arlen led him down a series of long metallic corridors that echoed with the sound of their footsteps. The walls were lined with monitors, each displaying real-time data from various research teams. Ethan couldn't help but notice how carefully controlled everything seemed, every piece of information, every interaction. It was as if the Academy's entire operation had been designed for efficiency, with no room for error. Finally, they arrived at a large circular room. At the center was a holographic table, surrounded by a dozen or so individuals, some human, others alien, all dressed in formal attire. They turned to look at Ethan as he entered. Their expressions were unreadable, their gazes calculating as they sized him up. Cadet 47, Arlen announced. He'll be assisting with the data analysis for the demonstration. Ethan nodded stiffly, doing his best to suppress his nervousness. He scanned the room, mentally cataloging each person in it. There was no sign of Zalari, no hint that the underground group had managed to infiltrate this meeting. He was alone, an outsider in a room full of predators. At the far end of the table, a tall, middle-aged human man in a sleek black suit stood. His hair was perfectly combed, his face sharp and angular, with a look of authority that commanded respect. His eyes met Ethan's for a moment before shifting to Arlen. Commander Arlen, the man said, his voice smooth and controlled. What do we have on the subject for today's demonstration? Arlen responded quickly, her tone respectful. We're proceeding with the next phase of the experiment, sir. Cadet 47 will be assisting with the real-time data feed. The man, Ethan assumed he was the head of this entire operation, gave a curt nod. Good. The subject is ready, I trust? A flicker of unease passed through Arlen's expression, but she quickly masked it. Yes, sir. We've had no issues with the subject's compliance. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The subject? He had assumed the meeting was about the human anomaly, but the way they spoke of it, the subject made him uneasy. Who or what were they referring to? Before he could ask any questions, the room's lights dimmed, and the holographic table came to life. A three-dimensional projection of a human being appeared in the center of the table. The figure was eerily lifelike, its features and proportions modeled after a typical human, but the skin had a strange, almost translucent quality. The eyes of the projection flickered as if alive, shifting in and out of focus. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he realized what he was looking at. It was him. But it wasn't. The figure displayed on the table was a distorted version of himself, altered, twisted, with unnatural features. His muscles were more defined, his eyes glowing faintly with an otherworldly light, his body radiating a strange energy. Arlen stepped forward, her expression grim. This is the test subject. Cadet 47, take a look at the analysis of the subject's current condition. Ethan's hands clenched into fists as he stepped closer to the table. His eyes scanned the data scrolling across the screen. The subject, the version of him on the table, was being tested for a range of unknown abilities from enhanced strength to mental manipulation. The readings showed extreme fluctuations in energy levels, as though the subject's powers were volatile, unpredictable. What's happening to him? Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Arlen didn't answer immediately. Instead, the head of the operation, the man in the black suit, spoke up. This, he said, is the future of the human race. And it is not without cost. Ethan's mind raced as the realization hit him. The Academy wasn't just experimenting on him, they were using him as the template for a weaponized human race. He wasn't just a subject in an experiment, he was a prototype. A template for something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. He had to stop them. He had to find a way to stop this before it was too late. But how could he expose them without being caught? How could he get the evidence he needed when they were watching his every move? The walls of the room seemed to close in on him as the weight of the situation settled in. The Academy had underestimated him once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The tipping point. The meeting room was suffocating. The faces around the table were all unreadable, their eyes trained on the holographic projection of the altered version of Ethan. The entire room felt like a cold, clinical operation, one that had long since lost any semblance of humanity. But as the minutes ticked by, something inside Ethan began to harden, a cold, calculated resolve forming. The head of the operation, Dr. Halcyon, as Zalari had warned him, spoke again, his tone icy and detached. This project has the potential to revolutionize not just human evolution, but the entire galaxy. Cadet 47 is the key. We've made great strides, but there's still so much to learn. The volatile energy readings are concerning, but they're manageable. We will make it work. Ethan's stomach churned as he watched the projection of himself flicker and pulse with energy. The changes they had made to his genetic structure, whether through technology or some form of biological manipulation, were far more advanced than anything he had ever heard of. They had used him, molded him into a weapon, and now they were pushing the boundaries of human potential in ways that could have catastrophic consequences. His gaze shifted to the data on the table. Every piece of information displayed was evidence of his own transformation, the culmination of the twisted experiments that had been carried out on him for weeks. But there was something more, a pattern. The energy levels fluctuating within the projection weren't just random surges. They were synchronized, each one building upon the last. Ethan's breath caught as the truth hit him. They weren't just testing the limits of his abilities. They were creating a weapon designed for something far darker than they were letting on. These energy surges weren't just about power, they were a signal. A signal to trigger something much larger, something that would resonate across the galaxy. We'll need to ramp up the tests, Dr. Halcyon continued, his voice gaining a certain enthusiasm. Once we've mastered the control mechanisms, we can begin to scale up. The potential for combat, espionage, intelligence gathering. We'll be able to direct this force, this power, anywhere. The word combat sent a ripple of horror through Ethan. He had known they were turning him into something dangerous, but he hadn't anticipated the scale of their ambitions. These weren't just small-scale experiments, they were preparing an army. An army of enhanced humans with him as their prototype. Arlen, who had remained silent during most of the meeting, finally spoke up. And the risks? There have been complications with previous subjects. The energy fluctuations aren't consistent. What if we can't control them? Dr. Halcyon glanced at her with a dismissive wave. The risks are inherent. But they're manageable. We've already seen promising results in the cadets. Their abilities are improving at an exponential rate. Soon we'll be able to push beyond even the limitations of the human body. The transformation will be complete. Ethan barely registered the conversation anymore. His mind was reeling. The fact that they were so close to finalizing their work, the fact that they had planned to use him as the model for this new breed of human weapon, was overwhelming. He had to act fast, or this would become the new reality for humanity. His eyes flicked around the room again, landing on a group of engineers and scientists huddled together in a corner, discussing the data projections. One of them, a younger woman with short, dark hair, seemed unusually tense, her brow furrowed as she stared at the screens. Something about her demeanor didn't fit the rest of the room. She was nervous, almost as if she were trying to hide something. It didn't take long for Ethan to realize what she was doing. Her hands were shaking as she typed commands into the system, her eyes flicking nervously to the others in the room. She was altering the data. Ethan's pulse quickened. Was she sabotaging the experiment? Or was she simply trying to hide something from the higher-ups? Either way, it was clear she didn't want anyone to know what she was doing. In a flash, his decision was made. He had to trust her. "Excuse me," Ethan said, his voice steady but loud enough to get the attention of the entire room. Everyone turned to face him, their expressions neutral. "I need to review the data feed. The latest results. There's something off about them." The room went silent, the eyes of every participant now trained on him. Dr. Halcyon raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed by the interruption, but gestured for Ethan to continue. "Go ahead, Cadet 47. You're here to assist after all." Ethan walked over to the console where the young woman was working. He could see her tense as he approached, but he gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. She didn't return it, but her hands stopped shaking long enough for him to lean over her shoulder. "Is everything all right?" he whispered under his breath. The woman shot him a quick, nervous glance. "Don't make it obvious," she whispered back, her voice strained. "I'm trying to give you an edge. The next phase, when they try to activate the prototype, they're going to push the limits. You'll be able to escape if you act quickly. Just wait for the signal." Ethan's mind raced. Escape? What was she talking about? But before he could ask for clarification, the conversation around the table began to pick up again. "Let's proceed," Dr. Halcyon ordered. "Cadet 47, the system is ready for the next demonstration. Your data feed will be crucial." Ethan straightened up, his nerves jangling as he took the console controls. He quickly skimmed through the data on the screen, mentally noting the discrepancies. The woman had definitely altered something. "Everything seems in order," he said, trying to sound as convincing as possible, though his heart was pounding in his chest. A small flash of a grin flickered across Dr. Halcyon's face. "Good. Begin the sequence." Ethan's hands hovered over the controls, his mind screaming at him to do something, anything, before the experiment went any further. He needed more time. More information. But as the system's countdown began, and the energy in the room thickened with the intensity of the moment, the young woman's voice cut through his thoughts. "Now." Without thinking, Ethan slammed his palm down onto the console, diverting the system's main control to the auxiliary backup. The room was immediately filled with a sharp, discordant sound, a feedback loop that set the entire facility into emergency mode. For a split second, the tension broke. Everyone in the room froze as the alarms blared, the lights flickering as the emergency systems kicked in. Ethan looked up just in time to see the young woman quickly slip away, disappearing into the shadows as chaos unfolded around him. Dr. Halcyon was livid. "What is this? Shut it down, now?" Ethan's mind was a blur, but he knew one thing for certain. His time had run out. The countdown for the activation of the prototype had been stopped, but only temporarily. If he didn't get out of there now, if he didn't act fast, the consequences would be catastrophic. And worse, now that they knew someone had interfered, they would come for him. The final gambit. The emergency alarms screamed through the facility, but Ethan's mind was as sharp as a blade. His heart hammered in his chest as the lights flickered overhead, bathing the room in a strobe of red and white. Panic was spreading among the personnel as systems failed, but Ethan knew this was his only chance. Dr. Halcyon's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, though tinged with fury. "Find him. Find Cadet 47. Lock down every exit, every hallway. He's not getting away." Ethan didn't hesitate. He sprinted for the nearest doorway, his footsteps echoing in the corridors as he bolted down the sterile, metallic hallways. He had to get to the lower levels. He knew the layout of the academy better than anyone. He'd spent months studying it during his covert assignments. But now, every step felt like a countdown to his own capture. The systems were reactivating and he was running out of time. He glanced over his shoulder to see a group of security officers, alien and human, filling the hallway behind him. They were closing in fast. A cold dread settled in his stomach. They would have the entire building sealed off in minutes. He had no way out. Or did he? He turned a sharp corner and ducked into a small, unmarked door. He barely managed to catch it before it swung closed, locking it behind him. He was in a storage room filled with crates and old equipment, some of it experimental tech from previous projects. He glanced around frantically, searching for a way to escape. His eyes landed on a small, open vent at the far end of the room. It was a tight squeeze, but it was a chance. He wasn't going to get caught, not when he was this close. With a grunt, he hurried toward the vent and began pulling away the metal cover. His fingers burned as he worked quickly, his body tense and adrenaline flooding his system. The sound of distant footsteps grew louder, but he had no choice. This was his only shot. Finally, the cover came off and he squeezed into the dark, narrow vent. His body scraped against the edges as he crawled through the dusty tunnel, his heart racing as he heard the voices of security officers just outside. He had to move faster. The air in the vent was stifling and his arms ached, but there was no turning back now. As he crawled, Ethan's mind raced. The woman who had helped him, the one who had altered the data, what had she meant by the signal? What was he supposed to do with this information? Why had she risked everything to help him escape? He didn't have the answers. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't let them finish what they started. Whatever twisted plans the academy had for him and his fellow cadets, he had to stop it. And there was only one way to do that. At the end of the vent tunnel, Ethan came to a small maintenance hatch. It was locked, but he quickly tapped into the security system, overriding the locks with the access code Zalari had given him. The hatch swung open silently, and he emerged into a small, dimly lit hallway. The silence of the hallway was unnerving. No alarms blared here. No footsteps echoed. It was as if the rest of the academy had forgotten about this hidden section, this forgotten space that led deep below the main complex. It wasn't part of the official blueprint. Ethan's comm device buzzed. He quickly checked the message. It was from Zalari. * we're in position. Follow the map. You need to shut it down or all of us will be in danger. The lower level is where they store the prototypes. *. His pulse quickened. Prototypes. Was this where they kept the altered humans? The dangerous weapons they had created? And more importantly, could he destroy whatever they had been working on? Ethan didn't waste another moment. He followed the directions, sprinting down the hallway, his mind focused on the task at hand. His steps quickened as he neared the entrance to the lower levels. The air grew colder, the scent of old tech and chemical compounds hanging in the air. He could feel the weight of the place, the ghosts of previous experiments, of people who had been used and discarded. He reached a heavy metal door at the end of the hall. It was reinforced, a barrier meant to keep unauthorized personnel from accessing the inner sanctum of the Academy's operations. A small, red light above the door blinked steadily, signaling that it was locked. But Zalari had anticipated this. Ethan pulled out a small device from his jacket pocket and attached it to the door's control panel. Within seconds, the lock released with a soft click and the door swung open. What he found on the other side nearly stopped his heart. The room was vast, filled with rows of pods, humanoid figures suspended in liquid-filled tanks, their bodies glowing faintly with an eerie light. The prototypes. The failed experiments. Their faces were contorted in various stages of alteration, their eyes lifeless, their bodies disfigured by the genetic changes they had endured. Ethan's stomach turned. These were the results of their work. This was what they had planned to unleash on the galaxy, humans twisted and weaponized beyond recognition. He walked through the room, his mind reeling as he took in the horrifying sight. The tanks lined the walls, each one holding a different prototype, each one more disturbing than the last. Some of the faces were familiar, their features eerily close to his own. These were his people, his DNA twisted and used as raw material for some monstrous experiment. The sound of footsteps echoed behind him. Ethan spun around to see Zalari, her eyes wide with determination. She was followed by a group of her allies, disgruntled former cadets, a few scientists who had been sympathetic to their cause, and even a few civilians who had managed to infiltrate the Academy's ranks. They were all here to stop it. "Get to the control panel," Zalari urged, her voice low and urgent. "We don't have much time." Ethan didn't hesitate. He rushed to the far end of the room where a large console stood, its lights flickering erratically. He immediately began typing commands, his fingers flying over the keys as he worked to disable the systems. The tension in the air was palpable, the sound of alarms beginning to rise once more as the facility detected the breach. But it was too late. Ethan was already deep into the system, disabling the bioneural link that had been keeping the prototypes alive, deactivating the containment systems that had been sustaining them. With each command he issued, the hum of the facility grew quieter. And then, silence. The pods began to empty, the glowing liquid draining from them. One by one, the prototypes crumpled, their bodies lifeless in their tanks. The twisted experiment was over. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt the weight lift from his shoulders. He had done it. He had stopped them. But as he turned to face Zalari, her face was grim. "This is only the beginning," she said quietly. "They will come for us. They'll try to rebuild. We can't stop now. We have to expose them to the galaxy. They won't rest until they've perfected this." Ethan nodded, the fight in his eyes now more determined than ever. They had won this battle. But the war was far from over. The final gambit. Ethan's hands were still trembling as he looked around the room. The empty tanks, the still bodies of the prototypes. These were the fruits of the Academy's twisted vision. But as Zalari's words echoed in his mind, the weight of their situation settled in. The momentary victory felt hollow. They had stopped the project for now, but the truth was that they hadn't even scratched the surface of the operation's true scope. Zalari moved to his side, her expression hardening as she observed the dismantling systems. "We have to expose this to the galaxy. If we don't, they'll just rebuild." They always rebuild? Ethan's mind raced. The Academy was far more than a covert research facility, it was the heart of a larger network of military power. And that network wasn't just Earth-based. It was intergalactic, stretching across planets and factions. Whatever the Academy had planned for humanity, it was part of something far bigger, something that could alter the course of the galaxy forever. "We need to act fast," Zalari continued. "We've only bought ourselves a short window. The transmission arrays here are already compromised, but they'll be able to fix it within hours. We can't just walk out of here. We need to get this data to the right people." Ethan looked at her, seeing the fire in her eyes. She wasn't just talking about survival. She was talking about a revolution. A revolution that would change everything. For the first time since his escape from the lab, Ethan felt a spark of hope. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He nodded, clenching his fists. "We need a way to broadcast the data. The entire operation. Everything." Zalari's face softened for a brief moment, a flicker of understanding passing between them. I know where we can send it. There's a black market station in orbit just outside their communications range. If we can get to it, we can broadcast the data. But we'll need to move fast. They'll lock down the entire facility soon. Ethan glanced back at the now empty pods. The experiments had failed, but the Academy's reach was still wide. There was no telling what other projects they had in place across the galaxy. The facility wasn't just a breeding ground for soldiers. It was a hub of power, and if they didn't act now, it would be too late. The data they had was a lifeline, proof that the Academy had crossed a line it couldn't come back from. We'll need to fight our way out, Ethan said, his voice steady, but his mind was already calculating the risks. He couldn't rely on stealth anymore. The countdown was already in motion. The data was their only weapon now. Zalari nodded grimly, turning to the others who had followed them into the lower levels. We've already got weapons cached in the North Wing. We'll use those to make our way out. But we don't have much time before they initiate full lockdown protocols. The group had been preparing for this. Ethan could see it in their eyes. These weren't just rebels. These were survivors, former soldiers and scientists who had lived through the dark side of the Academy's experiments. They weren't afraid of the fight ahead. And neither was he. Without another word, they all began to move in unison, taking the data files from the control terminal and securing them in encrypted drives. As Ethan turned toward the exit, the sound of distant gunfire echoed through the hallways. The Academy's response was swift and brutal. We've been compromised, Zalari said, her eyes scanning the room. They know we're here. We have to move now. The walls vibrated as the first round of energy blasts ricocheted off the walls. The entire facility was on lockdown, but that didn't matter to them. The doors to the North Wing would still be open for a few more minutes before the system fully sealed them in. Ethan and Zalari led the group through the maze of dark corridors, their footsteps muffled by the thick walls. The sounds of alarms grew louder and the tension in the air was palpable. They were under attack from all sides. The Academy wasn't just going to let them leave. We'll hold them off here, one of Zalari's allies, a burly man with a deep scar running down his cheek, said, positioning himself near an armored door. You two take the data and get to the extraction point. We'll cover you. No, Ethan said, his voice low but firm. We go together. You hold them off if you must, but we don't leave anyone behind. Zalari gave him a hard look, but she didn't argue. She understood what he meant. They were a team now. They couldn't afford to lose anyone else. If they did, the cost of their mission would be too great. The next few minutes were chaos. Gunfire erupted as the Academy's security forces stormed the hallway, their blasters flashing in the dark. Zalari's team fought back, providing a barrage of suppressing fire as Ethan and Zalari pushed forward toward the extraction point. Ethan's body was a blur, his enhanced reflexes kicking into overdrive as he dodged incoming fire and returned shots with brutal precision. He didn't hesitate. He couldn't. Every shot he took brought them one step closer to the truth being exposed to the galaxy. He knew that if they didn't succeed here, if they didn't get the data out, they would all be lost. Almost there, Zalari called, her voice strained as she fired off another round. She was right beside him, her eyes focused on the path ahead. They reached the extraction point, a small hangar hidden behind a set of reinforced doors. Inside, a sleek shuttle waited for them, its engines already humming in anticipation. The shuttle was their only ticket off the facility. But as they reached the door, the lights above flickered, and the sound of reinforced doors slamming shut echoed through the hallway. We're not getting through that door without a fight, one of Zalari's allies grunted. Then we fight, Ethan replied, grabbing a blaster from the nearest crate and heading toward the door controls. Get to the shuttle. I'll hold them off. Zalari's face darkened with determination. I'll fight with you. We're in this together. The air around them crackled with tension as they prepared for the final assault. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was clear. This was the moment. This was their final chance to stop the Academy from succeeding in its twisted plans. With the data, the truth would be revealed. And when the galaxy knew what had been done, the Academy's reign of terror would come to an end. The heavy doors began to open, revealing a swarm of Academy security officers, armed to the teeth, ready to fight to the death to protect their secret. Ethan and Zalari exchanged a brief look, then the battle began. But no matter what happened in the next few minutes, one thing was certain. They would not stop until the galaxy knew the truth. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.